Hello, welcome to the Ask Rusty podcast. I'm your host, attorney Rusty Messer, and each week I answer your questions about personal injury cases. We are joined today by our co-host, Maria, our client support specialist. Maria, today we're going to talk about something that has been very big in the news for a while, but we haven't really dealt with it. So we're going to talk about P. Diddy's case, but not really so much the criminal case as we are about the civil case. So what I want to do here, because we've gotten a lot of questions about this, we've gotten a lot of comments about it, but I really want to go beyond the headlines and talk about the personal injury aspects of it, the workplace dynamics, what is a non-disclosure agreement, and how some of these old allegations are coming back. So before we get into that, I'm going to ask you to go down, hit that like button, subscribe, share this content. It really helps the channel. All right, so let's talk about some of these complex legal principles. So by now, everybody knows P. Diddy has a lot of criminal charges, right? They are currently in trial right now. I think as we're filming this, the prosecution is just about to rest, or maybe they have rested. His defense team has already announced that they're not calling any witnesses. His charges range from rape, bribery, drug trafficking, transporting people for sex, all kinds of things. But in addition to the criminal problems, he is facing more than 100 civil cases. Now, let me give you a disclaimer here. I am not involved in any of his cases on the criminal side or the civil side, so I don't have any inside information about what's going on. I'm not disclosing any attorney-client privilege, but I do want to talk about the broader impact of his case from the personal injury side. All right? So to start off, let's talk about the workplace dynamics of how these cases come up. So in all of these cases, you'll have an imbalance of power. So you'll have a boss, a supervisor, a high-profile celebrity, someone like that who has the ability to assert influence over somebody below them. Now, when they abuse this, and it's not always a physical abuse, but when they abuse this, you can get criminal charges out of it, but it can also give rise to civil charges.
Can you explain the difference between a criminal case and a civil case?
Sure. So in a criminal case, it's brought by the government, the state or the feds, maybe a county or a parish. So it's brought by the government and it's trying to put somebody in jail or have somebody pay a fine, some kind of punishment for breaking a law. A civil case is about money. A civil case is brought by one private party against another private party, and it is seeking compensation for injuries. So let's talk about some of the types of injuries that we see in these civil harassment cases. So again, you have this person in a superior position, and maybe they are using their position to say, hey, look, if you want this job, you're going to do this other thing. All right, if you want this promotion, you're going to do this other thing that I don't want you to do. So that, of course, can give rise to physical injuries. Obviously, sexual assault is a physical injury, but it can also give rise to mental anguish, to emotional distress, the distress of having to work in an environment when you never know when your boss is going to come put something like that on you. And that is a claim that you can recover against in a personal injury case. Now, a lot of people, when they hear about situations like this, especially when you get into like P. Diddy's case where he was having these lavish parties, doing these freak-offs as they were called, and bringing people in, having people perform all kind of crazy acts, drugging people, things like that. A lot of people, when they hear about these things, they'll say, well, wait a minute. If you wanted that job so bad, right, if that job was so important to you, then you got what you deserved. And of course, that's a terrible outlook. Or why would you do that if you wanted that job? You didn't have to do that. Or why would you do that just to get into that industry? But you got to understand, somebody in that position with somebody with authority over them, they might really need that job. They might have kids to feed, bills to pay, or you look in the situation for P. Diddy's case, someone trying to break into that industry, and so they've spent probably their lifetime up to that point, developing their skills, trying to get into that industry. Now this person who has the ability to shut them out is asserting this power over them. So that is an injury you can recover for. That is a claim that you can bring. I had a case one time where there was a boss, he wasn't the owner of the company, he was a supervisor, but he was making an employee basically be his date at corporate functions. So whenever there would be like a company party, he would make her, get dressed up and come and basically almost pretend to be his girlfriend at the party. So even though there was nothing physical happening, he was using his position to put her in an uncomfortable situation that caused her mental and emotional injuries. So another thing that we're seeing a lot in the P. Diddy cases is what is called a non-disclosure agreement. We also call them NDAs. It's basically just a contract to keep something confidential. And NDAs by themselves aren't really a bad thing. They have lots of uses. They get used a lot in contract negotiations. They get used a lot to protect trade secrets or intellectual property, but they also get used to resolve lawsuits. Now, there are some times when people try to use an NDA to resolve a lawsuit when it can't be used, or maybe use an NDA to prevent what they think is going to be a lawsuit. So you cannot have a non-disclosure agreement that prevents the disclosure of some illegal activity. You cannot have a non-disclosure agreement that is too broad. In other words, you can't say, you're going to work here for 4 years, you can't ever talk about anything that happened whatsoever during the 4 years. Well, that's too broad. It has to be specific, all right? And you cannot have a non-disclosure agreement that takes away somebody's basic rights. And that's when we see these things get challenged, right? So if you have, in the P. Diddy case, I'm sure we're going to see that there were non-disclosure agreements covering maybe prostitution or, forced sex or drugging or things like that. Well, that's illegal acts. You can't have a non-disclosure agreement to cover those things up. In a real-world example that we might face, you can't have a non-disclosure agreement that takes away your basic right to a harassment-free workplace, or you can't have a non-disclosure agreement that says you can't sue me for anything ever, even if we don't know what it is. So non-disclosure agreements are going to become a pretty hot topic once the civil litigation gets going. And know that they're not all bad. Sometimes they get challenged, sometimes they hold up, and sometimes they don't. All right, probably the last topic I really want to talk about, what's going to happen with all these civil cases, is what's called the statute of limitations and some old allegations. So a statute of limitations is just a deadline to file a lawsuit. Here we have claims that we're going to see in P. Diddy's case is that some of these claims are actually quite old. So from just the lawsuits that I've seen online, some go back to like 1991. There's even one case that goes back to 1972 when P. Diddy was 3 years old. So that one's probably going to have some problems. But the statute of limitations, so let's go back to maybe like that 1991 claim. Well, if that claim is being brought in 2024 or 2025, his defense attorneys are going to argue that it's outside of the time to bring that claim. Now, most states have an injury statute of limitations of somewhere between 2 to 4 years. But for sexual assault claims, there are often longer statutes of limitations. Some states have statutes up to 10 years. A lot of states have statutes that don't go into effect. They don't even begin until somebody turns 18 or 21, then they might run for a longer period of time. And some states even have something called a revival statute that might open up a window to file a lawsuit for something that happened a long time ago. We see this the most in like priest and clergy type claims, for those types of abuse claims, where they'll open up and say, all right, everybody who was abused during this time period between, like, say, 1970 to 1990, you now have 1 year to file your suit. That would be an example of a revival type claim. So the statute of limitations is definitely going to be a defense that we see P. Diddy's attorneys raise. Another defense that we're going to see is that some of these claims are alleging, like, say, somebody will say, well, I was abused from 2004 till 2009. Well, the defense is going to say, well, if you were abused in 2004, why did you stay until 2009? So we're going to see a lot of litigation over that issue, and we're going to see a lot of litigation over the financial incentive for filing a claim like this, because let's be honest, all these people are seeking compensation, and P. Diddy has a lot of money to pay compensation. So I'm excited to see what comes out once these claims really get going. A lot of them have kind of been on hold, waiting for the criminal trial to get resolved. Hopefully we'll be getting a verdict in that here very soon. Once we do, these civil cases are going to get going, and we're going to be seeing these issues about how this imbalance of power, about the claims that Diddy used his position to maybe keep people out or to force people to do things they otherwise wouldn't do. We're going to see these non-disclosure agreements litigated, and we're going to see these defenses. All right, it's going to be very interesting, and I'm sure we'll be talking about it again. All right, thank you for tuning in today. If you like this episode, make sure to subscribe to our channel. If you or someone you know is dealing with an issue like this, if you've been harassed in your workplace, or if you just have questions about what your rights are, feel free to give us a call or send us an email, fill out our form on our website. We would love to talk to you about it with a free and confidential consultation.